Live stream microphone check, 2, 3.
Testing.
Oh, sorry.
That's it.
Yeah. Right, we're going to start the meeting now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So, welcome and good evening to the policy panel this evening. I'm Councillor Jocelyn Law, and I'm the chair of the panel and will be chairing the meeting tonight. To begin with, there are a few matters of housekeeping. There are no planned evacuations this evening. So if an alarm sounds, please can you make your way out of the town hall by going down the staircase and the back staircase to the High Street, and then to the car park behind the Town Hall on St Runwald Street. The meeting is being recorded for broadcast on the internet tonight on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will be available to watch afterwards as well. Please, would speakers speak in a position close to the microphone at all times. Apologies, I think I was a bit too close before in my keenness, so yes, I'll get it right eventually. So please do speak though in a position close to the microphones, because that's very important to activate the audio recording, and also where it's required for those using the hearing loop system. Please, right, apologies. Members of the panel are welcome to use electronic devices to access the agenda and reports, and also to participate in social media. And visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly and turn them to silent, and do not use camera or flash functions. We may have a break as well this evening at 8 o'clock, and that's depending on the time and the agenda items remaining. There are toilets on each floor of this building, and there is an induction loop in this room. So now we'll move to introductions of the members of the panel this evening. As I said before, I'm Councillor Jocelyn Law. I'm chair of the panel and ward councillor for Highwoods, and we'll move round to my right. Thank you.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Leslie Scott-Butera, ward councillor for Stanway, deputy chair.
Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Rhys Smithson, representing Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Sue Lissimore, representing Prettygate Ward. Councillor Jackie McLean, representing Marksdale Lair Ward, and also subbing for Kevin Bentley.
Councillor Julie Young, Greenstone Ward.
Dorina Hammond, I work for Community 360 and I'm a guest speaker tonight.
Good evening, Tom Taylor, Community and Partnership Team Manager.
Hello, James Sinclair. I look after the Essex Procurement Partnership.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
And Rosa Tanfield, Head of Neighbourhood Services and Lead Executive Officer for tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody. So moving along through the agenda, item 2, substitutions, as we've already heard. Thank you very much. We have Councillor Jackie McLean subbing for Councillor Kevin Bentley this evening. Item 3, I believe there are no urgent items this evening. Item 4, declarations of interest. Have members got any declarations of interest that they need to make for the meeting this evening? No? Okay, thank you very much. So moving along then to item 5, minutes. So the panel is asked to approve the minutes of the last policy panel held on the 29th of November 2023 as a correct record. Are we able to agree with the minutes? Agreed? Thank you very much. So that's noted, agreed minutes. So moving then on to item number 6, have your say. I don't believe we have any members here for have your say this evening. So moving on then to item number 7. This is on the asset-based community development and asset mapping update. And the presenting members tonight are Tom Taylor, who's the Community and Partnerships Team Manager from Colchester City Council, and we also have and welcome Dorina Hammond from Community 360. So I believe, Tom, thank you, you're beginning.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, fantastic. So, as Chair mentioned, a bit of a double act. I'm going to cover the first section around asset-based community development and communities can, and then take questions after that specifically, if that's okay. Then we'll move on to Dorina to talk about asset mapping. So, by way of brief introduction and history around asset-based community development, Colchester City Council received £35,000 in funding from the Active Essex Local Delivery Pilot to support the training in regard to asset-based community development. And we've kind of branded it in Colchester as Communities Can.
Could you, Tom, could you move closer?
Is that better? Apologies. So we've branded asset-based community development in Colchester as Communities Can. This training is delivered through an organisation called Nurture Development. So that's run by a leading figure in the world of ABCD called Cormac Russell. And we've already had some of that training that's taken place since 2021. The numbers, we've trained internally around 80 staff, and that doesn't include members. We've done some separate ABCD training with members and senior leadership team in this time. Currently, training is paused as part of our kind of organisational restructure and transformation. But we're hoping that we can pick that back up as we go this year. Currently, our officers are working with Nurture Development around how to use and repurpose the resource we've got left. And I'll go on to talking about how we'll do that now. From the resource that we've delivered through the training and through the discussions, we've been able to do a fair bit of evaluation. So we're working alongside colleagues from Active Essex as part of the local delivery pilot. And we've already conducted some early ripple effects mapping. We did a session in November. We've got another one due in February, which is great. Essentially, that reviews the specific impacts and outcomes of that training and pretty much what it says on the tin, the ripples and all around the people, the places, the spaces, and the effect it's had on the environment. Those conversations and that evaluation is going to really help us shape what we do next and kind of feed into that. We've also done some internal evaluation with colleagues who have participated in the training so far. So we're using that to, again, build and shape what we do in the future. But broadly, really positive, although there's a clear need that we've identified already to make sure that the training is relevant and transferable across all of our different services, as we know that's quite broad. So a bit of a challenge, but it's something we're doing work on at the moment. Now, bear with me while I play with the tech. I'm just going to jump out to play a video. I'm hoping this is going to work. So if this works, this is Mark Healy. He's in our community and partnerships team. He's going to talk to us about the impact it's had on him, so the training and how he's tried to put that into our practices.
My name is Mark Healy. I work with the
There with.
community enabling team with
It's quite quiet, isn't it?
No, but Mark's looking good.
Mark looks great. Let me just make sure I've turned up all my sound. Apologies.
Tom Taylor and Michelle Tarbin. About 12 months ago, the whole team completed the Nurture Development ABCD training. It was every week for around 8 weeks. We were guided through the whole process by the same tutor, which was really useful for us because we were able to relate and had a connection there. And also had the opportunity to chat with Cormac Russell, who is very much a visionary of community engagement and asset-based community development. It was a really good experience for me as a practitioner and professional within community engagement. It made me think more of the resident inside me rather than a local authority worker. And that's what ABCD does, rather than doing for communities. It's working with communities. And when a community, a group of residents on 2 or 3 streets have an idea, have a concept, that's what ABCD is. It's helping that concept idea to bring it to life, to see what resource we have locally and to bring that together. As I say, it did tilt my view on community engagement rather than being a local authority worker. It drew out the resident with me. I'm a resident of Colchester, like probably most of you, for all of my life. And I often now think of the perspective as a resident as well as a local authority worker now. We've got some incredible ABCD groups already in our soon-to-be city. We all know about the Anti-Luo Brigade, the FANS network, Les Nickel, but also our parish councils. They're perfectly placed to be in touch with local.
It was going so well. Let me stop sharing. We've kind of got the most of that. There was only a little bit left. So, hang on a second. Here we go. Just waiting for the screen to catch up. Perfect. So Mark describes really well what the principles of asset-based community development are, communities can, what we've tried to do, and give some examples to it. There's a list on the screen that I will go through of current projects and programs that have got ABCD elements within them. But I'm just going to skip to the last point, actually, that asset-based community development has been taking place for a long time. It's just not maybe had the label or the sticker on it that says it's asset-based community development, or it's communities can, as we're now calling it. So this isn't all brand new, but it's something that we're really trying to make an effort and to try and put the structure behind it. So some of the projects and programs that have got within them the elements of it. So we've got some community greening processes where people can apply for licenses, for allotments, and be able to run their own green spaces within their community. Community days of action, and Make a Difference days, or all the different variations that they've been for a long time. They are led by local people with local spaces, with that kind of hyper-local knowledge. Very similar to the Section 106 process, hopefully, that the people in that area, ward councillors, parish councils, can feed into that process, and they can help us identify some of the community facilities. Lots of events. Winter Warmers has recently happened within Grinstead. There's the Great Winter Clean as well that's going on, but events throughout the calendar year that embed those principles. We've got a residents panel, which again can hopefully ensure that the views of our residents are being fed into this process, or being fed into our services and what we're delivering. And Stanway Together, which is one example that, again, a community group that are coming together with key knowledge of their local organisations and their local people to do that. There's the Saint group in Grinstead. There's lots of different variations of that in different places. So just a few examples there of stuff that is already taking place, but there'll be tons of other things that we're doing as well that will have these principles. I'm going to skip this video based on my last performance, and also the fact that I think you've probably seen it before, but I can share it if people want to. But essentially it's Pam Donnelly and Cormac Russell just introducing this, but it's a little bit older, and this is something that we're looking to repurpose as we go forward. So I hope you don't mind. So in terms of what's next, I've spoke a lot about evaluation and what we're doing, and that it's on pause. We're kind of taking stock of where we are at the moment. We're having lots of different discussions with different services around how asset-based community development, how communities can have an impact, how can that structure affect, like I said right at the start, all the different things that we do as a council. And some areas it's really obvious, some areas we probably need to have a little bit more thought around it and try and position it, but also make sure we do a little bit better potentially at recording what we're doing that fits into this and what's already happening. We've got a post that is a Communities Can post, so a very clear label there that sits within Community 360, so it's hosted by local community voluntary service. It's funded through the LDP, so it's got a physical activity lens on it, but it's all about helping those smaller grassroots organisations become a little bit more self-sufficient. How can they make sure they're embedding these practices as they go forward? So a real big step, I think, because it's a new post that it's only been, I think, going for about 6 months. So it's probably a little bit too early to evaluate it yet, but the signs at the start have been great. We've got to change our introductory video and induction information. I think, as you saw, Mark still referred as a soon-to-be city. So as part of this pause and restart, we need to make sure that we're getting the branding right, the messaging right, but also how can we build this into our induction processes? So there's lots of staff that will have joined in the last couple of years that Some might have had the training at the start, some might not because we've paused. So how can we make it, I guess, a bit of a golden thread for people that join our organisation? Spoke about the remaining resource allocation and delivery, all part of what we're trying to do now. We've spoken to other local authorities who have received the same funding and how they've done it. And that's been really interesting because they've given us the confidence that we can decide how we use this resource. We don't have to pick from a predefined menu of we must do this, we must do that. So again, we'll be taking that into our conversations with Nurture Development. And I guess one of the final points is this is really about long-term behaviour change. It's not a short-term quick win process. That there's an essential need that we make sure that that perception is right. It doesn't happen quickly, but at the same time, we need to lean on what is already happening. And like I said, this has been going on for a long, long time under no label or not under asset-based community development. So it's not necessarily going to mean we get some real instant financial benefits, but over the long term, it should be really powerful for our residents and communities. And that is it. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Lissamore.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to ask about making communities aware of this, and also how do you hope to develop this? How do you hope to install in individuals, volunteers, communities, that they can do this? Rosa and I had a meeting earlier today. We were talking about a particular issue where perhaps the community group involved either haven't got the skills yet or don't believe they have the skills to actually do what they really need to do. So how do you hope to make people aware of this out there in the community and also ensure that we get the right people in the right place doing the right thing?
Thank you. So really good question actually around how we make communities aware. So at the moment, this training is internal for Colchester City Council, for our staff and for our services, for our members. So there's not a focus on that currently in terms of how we make them aware, but there is this training going on, our asset-based community development. It's happening in different places. Community 360 have got their own programs. So it's definitely something we need to look at and make sure that we're making our residents aware with this is what we're trying to do. And I think that's really important. And as you say, that's how we're going to be able to make sure that people can kind of pick this up themselves. And like you say, volunteers can be part of that, and how we can develop it. It's something we need to look at going forwards, definitely. I think the work that the Community Can office is doing really specifically as part of Community 360 with the grassroots sports organisations will be a key bit of learning, because that's the first time we've done that, and it's the real obvious kind of techniques and structures around sustainability going forward. So I think we plan to use that learning definitely to build that in, but yeah, we need to build on that and make sure that it's really clear and obvious. So our services, great, our staff, how can we transfer that onto residents, whether it's directly or indirectly, I think is part of the next planning.
Thanks. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much, Chair. The organisations that you alluded to in the presentation, or Mark referred to, got Les's surname wrong, just so you know. Nicol, not spelt right, not spelt like that. The individuals involved in those charities, Les at Nest and Pete at the Anti-Loo Roll Brigade, and many other groups out in the community, are based around the enthusiasm of an individual or a couple of individuals. And I suppose for me, this seems to have been around for a very long time. We had our training probably 2 years ago, I think, as councillors. And 35,000 being spent on training seems an awful lot when I can't really see the next steps, I suppose. And I suppose my appeal to you is, when community groups do come forward, and you'll be aware of some of the frustrations I've had with some of the groups, you know, particularly Greens to Growers, for example, you know, a group of individuals, it's been a tremendously successful project, and that is just digging up a grass virgin, planting vegetables. when it comes to, when push comes to shove, we're wanting £350 in legal fees to make that happen, which, if you enthuse individuals to do more in their community, we've got to have an eye on cutting red tape and enabling that to actually happen. So for me, it seems like slow progress, and the points that the successes you're pointing to are frankly not ABC successes, not the council's successes. They're Les Nichols' successes. They're Peter Anti-Loo Roll Brigade. They're Lisa at Greenstead Growers. They're people out there that are getting on with it, sometimes in despite of the council rather than with the council. So I suppose, if we're serious about getting communities to do more, then we actually have to stand behind them and help them and facilitate that. And, not say to a group of people that have come forward of their own volition, of their own free will to dig up a grass verge and plant vegetables in our most deprived ward. Well, if you've got £350, we'll put the legal, case in process, because that's just going to be a disincentive for people to coming forward and doing that. So I just say that to you, slow progress, 35,000 on training. I suppose really I'd probably rather see some of that spent on actual practical delivery of help. I mean, you and I had sleepless nights over trying to get children from Hargood Close after Sue identified, the rotten time children were having at that scheme there, temporary housing scheme, to the Panto and all of the hurdles we went through to get them there. So that, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Firstly, apologies about the spelling. I think it was an automatic translation, but I'll make sure we pick that up in the future. Really good points. I've noted them all down. Definitely slower progress than we wanted. I think some of that is where we're at organisationally, but I think you're right. I think there's work we can do, and it's how we harness those, we call them in the LDP kind of sticky people, or those people that are really committed in their community and pulling together all this change. So I think that's a point for us to take away, and how we use that resource, we can define that. So if it needs to be, we need to work with our system partners, which is something we do really well in Colchester. How can we look at doing that more as part of this? How can we look at maybe bringing some best practice, not from us, but from our community groups? And that kind of goes back to your point, Councillor Lismore. Maybe we can use this best practice that's happening, twin that with the resource we've got, and kind of put together a bit of a champion programme, or just build on that a little more perhaps. But thank you for your points.
Thank you. Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you. I've got one question and an observation, really. Following on from what Julie was saying about funding and supporting our local communities, this is where locality budget is really, really useful, because I use part of mine for the Stanway Together project, which is my baby. And I think that is a good source of funding. And I noticed that the leader is here, and I'm about to upset him by saying, for this reason, because everywhere is short of money, can I ask that we keep the locality budgets for next year to support our communities, because we're the ones that know our communities. That was the first point. And the other one, Tom, can you give me an idea of the demographics of the residents panel? Is it a good cover of age, et cetera, or are there areas that you could do with some support on finding the right people?
I don't have the detail in front of me, but from discussions that I've been part of, I still think we need to make sure it's a more diverse panel from what I've heard. So yeah, if we can take away anything back to look at that in detail, like I say, I can't give the answer now what we're missing as a group or what groups we might want, but let's pick it up and see what we can do. That's okay.
Councillor King.
Evening all. Happy New Year. God, it seems just a moment since I was here before you. On the budget, everybody knows or should just the depth of the challenge we've got to resolve over 2 or 3 years, with big decisions already being taken and others to follow. So I can't give a guarantee on locality budgets, but I can say that I personally understand why it matters to each member in varying degrees. We have to be honest about this, but it does matter to many. And I can see why, for the reasons you've described, you can help in a way that brings back a benefit to community and indirectly to the council. And Councillor Julie Young to my left and I had a conversation on this just yesterday. So the likely way ahead is that we will have an all-member conversation about this. You know, at what level are there different ways of combining locality funds in a way that members will feel some ownership of? Given the scale of change ahead, my personal take is that, you know, if we have to make a marginal decision in favour of, I will do that, because I want members to feel it's not just unrelenting challenge and that there's a listening ear. And I know this will be one of the things that matter. So I hope that's some help. That's all I can say at this stage of the process, but I kind of get it. If, Chair, you would allow me, I want to pick up the wider points well made about to the team as guidance in terms of their approach, which has to be that if we're going to ask for communities in all their various shapes and form to take up some of the slack, the City Council has got to help that happen. We've got to help the transition. We will have expertise sometimes that they will not have. They may be well-meaning and up for it, but there's a labyrinth, not just of regulations, but practicalities, kit, equipment, places to work from, all of that, which would take a lot of working through. And I'm sure you're on this. So the principle that I've agreed with the Chief Executive and my Cabinet and coalition colleagues is very much one you'd want to hear, which is we'll do what I've just said, which is help that process through. So where the City Council has to step back, it helps others to step forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'd like to invite Todorina to carry on with the next part of the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to have Tom to assist me. Okay, community asset mapping, tackling inequalities. Can go to the next one. So I'm just going to continue what Tom already discussed about the asset-based community development, and the community asset mapping is based on the asset-based community development. So basically we're looking on the neighborhoods, the good connections, the environment, the health service, the connections between the people, the culture, basically everything. So why community asset mapping? Gain a deep understanding of what facilitates and what presents barriers to access to services and how to address them. Key strengths and challenges for people and their families, carers within the community. Local cultural factors and limitations. Actually, the cultural diversity is present in every single report, and we've got lots of learning and how we can approach the different communities. You must probably aware, but we've got 26 diverse community groups in Colchester. So Colchester is really rich with diverse communities. And the biggest point in every single report was the citizens' voices. We've used citizens' voices from different areas across Colchester, and they reflect on the main topics of the different teams. Okay, so what we're looking at, barriers and enablers. Asking yes, what the barriers are, lack of language support and cultural understanding. And sometimes it's not only the professionals, it's the actual groups, they're not involved. So what we're looking is how we can approach these different communities so they can be more involved. Communication methods or the lack of plain language, sometimes professional jargon could be a barrier. Barriers transport, and actually transport is appearing in every single report of the community asset mapping, is always a big issue. It's not only the transport, but also the accessibility and the cost. Health inequalities, they vary in the different areas. And the other one is the recognition of carers, and it is more particular in unpaid carers and how their voices can be heard. Enablers, to be honest, I should have put this the other way around because we're using the ABCD approach. So we should have started with the enablers, not the barriers. The enablers, what we have, what works really well in the community, what already exists, and services that are trusted and close to home, usually a very good enabler. Transport is enabler as well as barrier. Advocacy is coming very strong in every single team. Being able to identify how one's needs are met, particularly where again we're talking about the different cultures. And we can move to the next one, please. So types of evidence. We are using the literature review, and what we do, we use open resources. So it's based on a national level, and then we're drilling down in what's local. Local strategies and plans, data from local health services, council, local services, any data really. We're knocking on every single door and finding what we have locally. Data from local community groups, interviews, focus groups, and all the interviews with the citizens' voices were done, I should have said this at the front, by Health Watch Essex. And the community groups, Community 360, and we're working also with tendering CVSs. We're using our intelligence with what groups we have, and also feedback from the domains. We had monthly meetings with the domain leads, so they were the main inputs on our reports. Next one, please. So this is just an overview, and what's very strong, again, you can guess, areas of deprivation and consistently evidence where the health outcomes are worse. And we do notice areas. However, it could be sometimes people don't want to engage to improve these areas. We have to find other ways to work with these communities. We do have some excellent services, and this is where we have to work what works really well. Much support within the community, but a lack of awareness and publicity. Again, people don't know where to turn if you don't know what exists locally. And this could be, again, lack of knowledge, or it could be lack of connections between the different diverse groups. What we found out from the different reports is still the focus is more on the professional and the medical support. And we had different training with Tom recently about the compassionate communities. So what we've learned is 44% of the people actually don't need professional support. What they want connection, they want other people, human support. So we have to turn our approach a little bit and see again what this human nature support is, what's basically work in the community, and get away from the professional and medical support. Again, signposting to support often national rather than local. And as I said previously, we need to recognize the impact of the carers. And I'm going to repeat it again, unpaid carers are the biggest heroes, and their voices are not heard very well. Moving to the next slide. So these are all the reports. Start well, feel well, be well, age well, stay well, and die well. They're all published for a different timeline. And all the reports on the Community 360's website, also Health Watch Essex websites and CVST websites. If you do need access to any of the reports, please let me know. Each report also has recommendations for improvement. Any questions?
Thanks very much. I just wonder if perhaps you can explain a bit more about sort of like future goals with the mapping program and the work you're doing. So I believe, have you been in post for 6 months? Is that right?
So the asset mapping work's been going on for 2 years. Each report is taking 3 months. Where we're moving forwards, I don't know, but the neighborhoods are using the findings from the reports so they can inform their strategies for the next 3 years. So as I say, each report has different recommendations for improvements. Transport's a big issue. And what we're looking at is, for example, transport, we can't really change the transport because it's beyond our reach. But what we can improve is access to timetables. Sometimes they're digitally and people might want to have it on paper copies. And again, are they available, for example, for people with sight loss? Do they have easy reads? I've got hearing loss, and sometimes if I can't see on the board anything, why have to use my phone all the time when the board's everywhere? So simple changes can have a great impact on the different communities. What we've learned, for example, as I said, we worked with 26 different diverse communities, and they're presented in the different reports because we wanted to hear from the different communities. For example, the Nepalese Society, we've got over 1,500 citizens living in Colchester. They don't use personal transport, they're relying on community transport. And again, if they don't have access to what timetable is available, it's very difficult for them to access different services. So small changes can have a huge impact.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Scott Battelle.
Thank you. Coming back on transport, I'm sure, Julie, you had a hopper bus scheme to get from Grinstead to the hospital, and I had one in Stanway. And we asked the people, we funded it from 106, and I think it was from memory called something like a Section 22 bus. And we funded it, and we had it running. And I think the same happened over in your ward. Everybody wanted it, but it was the safety net, and it wasn't used as much as people indicated. But I'm wondering if it's worth revisiting that, Tom, with 106.
Yeah, certainly can again take that offline and look into that and see what we might be able to do and make sure it's compliant, definitely.
I mean, it worked well, and when I was doing it, it was targeting the people that were still living in the family home. The family had moved out, but they couldn't drive anymore, and they were nowhere near a bus route.
Councillor Young.
Yeah, just going to add a bit of more information. I think I used some of my locality budget to kickstart that actually, but I did it through Community 360, and I think it was 4 journeys a day, if I remember rightly. And we had some funding from Essex County Council, and you could use your bus pass on it. I think it is a Section 22 service or something, but the take up in Grinstead wasn't great. And I guess, it was for a period of time, and then it stopped. So perhaps if it had been kept going, people would have got more used to the service. But yeah, I mean, certainly, for Grinstead, getting to the hospital was difficult because it's 2 bus journeys into the town centre and out again to the hospital. And, that's probably got the highest incidence of physical and mental health issues, but transport certainly is a big issue for them.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions from panel members, I'd just like to really thank Todorina for coming along today, to the council, and Tom for your presentations this evening. That's been really helpful. So I just want to sort of sum up really recommendations and thoughts from what I've heard from members. It seems to be that you're very keen for the work, the training on ABCD to be cascaded out to communities, groups, system partners, voluntary groups, and also in terms of sort of value for money to make sure that that can be expedited, the training, and also the support given to communities. And the sorts of the principles of ABCD in terms of being able to support communities and enable them to be able to help sort of like address any red tape or barriers for them to be able to sort of create change. I mean, Owen, have you noted any other areas or is it?
I hadn't noted any. I hadn't got any other formal recommendations suggested so far.
Would panel members agree with that? Are there any other items?
Agreed, Chair.
You agreed? Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay. So then, thank you very much to the presentation we've just had then on ABCD and mapping. And now we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, and that's item number 8, and that's the Essex Procurement Partnership. And we've got introductions from Sam Preston, Head of Operational Finance, and James Sinclair, who's the Braintree District Council. He's the specialist there in procurement. I think I've got the title right, apologies. Thank you very much. So over to Sam.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough. I'm going to say very little and hand over to James quite quickly, but really this, as mentioned in the report, was just to give you an update on what's going on with the Essex Procurement Partnership. Excuse me. Sorry, this is going to be a struggle. So early last year, we started having discussions with James, who's leading on the partnership, really to look at how Colchester could become part of it. I think we've been to policy panel a little while ago now to kind of update on some of the improvements that we were looking to make. And the kind of picture changed once we started talking about the partnership arrangement. So there's been lots of work going on in the background around how we can benefit from that partnership. And James will now just take you through some slides and then we'll take any questions at the end. So I'll just hand straight over to you, James, if that's okay.
Hello everyone, excuse me, I'm going to continue the coughing into the presentation, just for continuity. I'll just share my slides now because multitasking is not one of my skills. Okay. There we go, fantastic. Hi everyone, I'm James Sinclair. I work for Essex County Council and work across multiple authorities as the procurement specialist. So the Essex Procurement Partnership has been going for sort of just a little over really a year in terms of bringing it together. I'll go into detail into this presentation about why we set up the partnership, hopefully what the benefits are around this work, and how we can look to develop this going forward into the new year, and some of the benefits that hopefully that will deliver for Colchester City Council. Is this, am I speaking okay into the microphone? Brilliant, fantastic. Okay, so what is the Essex Procurement Partnership? Well, as I said, it's a collection of 6 local authorities from right away across Essex, and we are in discussions with other authorities who about potentially growing this once we're in a position where we are stable and able to do that in an effective way. And the purpose of it really is to increase resilience. So across councils, district, borough levels, you tend to have 1 or 2 people undertaking procurement activity. That's a bit of a risk really, because if that person goes off sick, or if they win the lottery and go on a really nice holiday, then that means that some of the sort of key projects really that depend upon procurement resource are delayed or can't happen for a period of time. And so what we want to do really is increase the resilience of the core team that supports across these councils. So as I say, if someone's off sick, there's other people within the wider team who can carry on taking on projects forward. Also, we need increased expertise. If you're one person with an organisation, undertaking all of the procurement activity in that organisation, then you will be spread pretty thinly, and you will be doing all sorts of different types of procurement, from big capital build projects to painting windmills or various other sort of small type procurement activity that happens there. So by having a larger team, we can both enable the focus on specific categories of spend in that team, because we'll have experience across multiple authorities. We'll know what works, and we'll know what doesn't work and what we won't be doing again. And so that should enable us to get better value from our third-party spend. So in these times where we are really tight on finances, what we need to make sure is that every single penny of our third-party spend is spent effectively, and we get the most out of our supply market. This is also increased by the fact we have access to the wider Essex County Council procurement team. That team is a much larger team and is split into specialisms. So you'll have a team that is a specialist around waste services. You'll have capital build specialists within that team. You'll have corporate spend specialists. So we can tap into those individuals and pick off their knowledge, really, understand what works and what doesn't work, and how we can develop that tender documentation to really deliver the best for each member of the partnership. Collaborative savings is obviously a key thing. Generally, not all the time, but generally, by pooling together spend, we can deliver economies of scale, and so we can get better value for money. Now, that doesn't always happen, obviously. There are some areas where we look at that and think, actually, it's much better to have it at lower levels. But generally, we can pool that together across certain categories, and that will enable us to get better value and, again, save each partner authority's budget an element. Access to that, and that's much better accessed if we're all working together as one team. We've tried that over a number of years to try and collaborate, but actually by having one team, we have one forward plan. We have access to the contracts registers. We're working together day in and day out, so we really understand what's coming up and how we can join together different elements of activity so that we are collaborating much more fully. We can reduce duplication. So we have new procurement regs coming up in October. There will be a lot of development of new tender documentation and new evaluation methodology and all sorts of things that sit around procurement. So when we looked at procurement, it was something around 80 documents that sit around the entire process. So significant pieces of work. By working together, we can do that once. So actually, instead of everybody sitting in their respective authorities, we can do that once across multiple authorities, but also that's really beneficial for small to medium enterprises, for Vonschetz organisations. So instead of thinking, they're doing a tender for Braintree District Council and they're doing a tender for Tendring District Council, and they're completely different forms and different approaches. We want to have one approach, so it's much simpler for people to get their head around. And what we're working on at the moment is to make that as simple as possible. What we don't want is any barriers whatsoever to these organisations in working with us. So we're trying to make all of that documentation as simple as possible. And we've been sort of taking hearings from Meet the Buyer activities and various other different organisations to try and listen to that. And then the final bit really is around staff retention. Procurement is a sort of fairly niche area, I suppose, and it's in demand and people move around quite a lot. And what we want to make sure is that we try and retain that talent as much as possible within the organisation. So by having the broader team and linking in with ECC, we're able to bring in knowledge much more effectively and offer a real career for people joining procurement within the council. So it makes it much more effective, hopefully, at retaining staff than if you just have one or two people within the organisation, because where can you go, really? So we've set out just there the vision, which is to enable best-in-class procurement, maximising the value of every pound spent by local authorities to the benefit of local residents. So that's really key. It's making sure that we are targeting everything to benefit our local residents. So who's in the Essex Procurement Partnership? We have Braintree, Castle Point, Essex, Colchester, Epping and Tendring District Council at the moment. We are, as I say, in discussions with some other authorities as well. It's really the coalition of willing. Everyone has been really massively supportive of this as an activity. We really want to focus on creating not just a service to everyone else, but a true partnership between these authorities. The team is small, so I'll go into some of the levels of activity that we do, but you'll see there that the team is only made up of, what is that, 8 individuals, Colchester have recently joined us, and James has joined us, James Jesney has joined us as of the last few days, really. So it's a small team that delivers, I think, a lot of value from the procurement activity that we do. You'll note there that it talks about senior procurement consultants and procurement consultants. Just to make note that these are employed members of the team. They are not, consultants that we've recruited in and paying sort of large day rates. They are people that we are employing. It's just different titles that have evolved over time. And you'll see that the colouring of those boxes also denotes people sitting in different local authorities. And so at the moment, it's a collection of multiple different authorities working together. I mentioned a moment ago, it's a true partnership. We were really dead set on this. What we don't want to do is create a procurement service that people buy into, and then there's this sort of thought that, are they doing it to generate some income, to try and plug a budget gap in one particular authority. This is not it. This is a partnership. It's a true partnership between all of the authorities who are working together on this. And we've created a number of boards within this group to set the direction of the service. So we have this partner working group, which is made up of a officer with responsibility for procurement across each of the partner authorities. They will look at the current procurement projects, they'll consider collaboration opportunities, they'll manage issues and risks as they arise, and they'll review common documentation and processes so that everybody is signed up to this. But then we have this strategic officer group, which sets the direction of the partnership. So that's led by Dan Gascoigne, who I'm sure you'll remember, who's obviously now Chief Exec at Braintree, and has director, senior level involvement across each of the partner authorities. So one representative per authority, equal voice. And that sets a strategic direction of the partnership, agrees the priorities of it, makes sure we're doing what we should be doing. And that's really important to hold us to account. And then finally, we have the member advisory group. So that has representation again from elected members, one for each partner authority, again to bring in some of that expertise from outside of procurement so that we can sort of test ourselves and challenge ourselves to make sure we're doing what we should be doing, but also frankly a networking, which is an absolute skill for members, which we can tap into and look as we look to grow the service and as we look to peer review ourselves against other organisations. This, I won't go into this every single step of this, but this is our journey over the last year and a tiny bit. So we sort of started off with really introducing the concept, and then we moved on to sort of gathering contract data and contract registration. That is so key to really understand, particularly with the procurement regs and the transparency requirements of those coming up in October, to absolutely understand what we spend, what our contracts are. So we started gathering all of that data early on. started creating that common documentation that I mentioned, identifying where there's common spend activity and using tools such as Power BI to do that. We developed branding and reporting, so when we are presenting to partner working groups, we're presenting information so you have absolute confidence that we are delivering the right service on behalf of each local authority. We have looked at social value and agreed across those 6 authorities a common social value approach. What we'll be looking forward to now is embedding that and developing that into those organisations. And part of the reason we haven't been able to do that yet is because when we actually started gathering all of that spend activity, we found a huge amount of activity that we needed to do around procurement. So we had a significant increase in workload from that increased transparency of spend, which saw the level of activity that we do rocket. And that was really useful and shows the value, I think, in this team to reduce the risk to local authorities and to really drive value in the activity we do. So we've got a little firework there around culture to joining, so that was really fantastic. And then we started talking to other authorities about some of this activity. The member advisory group was held towards the back end of last year, and we approved the terms of reference, and then we recruited some additional resource funded by Tendring District Council to provide some additional capacity, primarily focused on some of this social value activity that we wanted to do. So here's some key metrics that we've got there. And some of these figures are extrapolated because we haven't got all of the information, but about 55 million approximate value of contracts that we're covering, 700 contracts based on the data that we've built up so far. These are all increasing as we gather additional information. 111 is the number of projects currently on the forward plan, and 104 is the number of procurement activities delivered since we started. So given that that team at that point, because it doesn't include Colchester City Council figures at the moment, because they're fresh into the partnership, but given there's only about 4 members of staff, that works out about 26 procurements per member of staff. So you can see the level of activity that they have been undertaking since April, which I think is a real tribute to their hard work. We've agreed these priorities. So priority 1, understand liquidity. Undertake sourcing activity, make sure that that is absolutely compliant, and create those robust systems and processes. As those are embedded as our foundation, then we move on to those priority 2s, and it's around creating frameworks. So we have frameworks already for the procurement hub, which bring in rebate, and we want to expand those and deliver increased frameworks which both benefit us. Obviously, it makes it a lot easier to do that procurement activity, but also it will bring in additional income to the partnership and help offset the cost of procurement. We're developing the professionalism of procurement in each partner. I've undertaken an assessment over the last 3 weeks with each of the team members within the service, and that's developed a tailored plan for what training they will need, and that training will be delivered by Essex County Council, so we'll be able to tap into that knowledge that's there, and the sort of bigger department that ECC has enables us to access much more information and training than we otherwise would be able to achieve. We're growing procurement and market knowledge. So as we build our forward plan, we have moved from being reactive in procurement and having to turn things around in a month to knowing what's coming up in the next 18 months, which then means that we can go out to the market, we can understand what innovation is available in that market, what we can do differently, and then that hopefully enables us to better specify what we require and deliver benefits to our residents and potentially savings from some of the innovation that's available in that market. And then that priority 3, so as we sort of start building this up and we have much better foundations, we know what we're going to spend, we're not so reactive, we're all working together off common documentation. That frees up the time then when we can start to take specific categories of spend and really understand those in detail, and start to identify where there's more collaborative procurement opportunities and where there's more savings opportunities. We can then look at contract management. Income is lost through contract management, so we can go through contract management, and then we can develop that social value, although we're bringing that forward because we have some additional capacity thanks to Tendring District Council's investment. Our ambitions for 2024, complete the implementation of that common documentation, so we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and everybody is working off the same documentation with there. So that work is happening early on in 2024. We want to deliver and record savings from some of these collaborative opportunities that we're doing at the moment, so temporary agencies, procurement, vehicles, looking at collaborative purchase of vehicles. So we're building up a list of what vehicles are being bought by each authority over the next couple of years so that we can go out and buy that together. And collaborative corporate opportunities, so things like insurance and systems and things like that. We are looking at that. We want to have that great confidence in contract liquidity. So contract liquidity basically means we know what we're spending, and we know the contracts that are involved in it. So we want to have absolute confidence in that. We want to embed the things and outcomes approach to social value so that we can show the level of social value and really increase the social value that we are delivering to our residents through procurement activity. We want to reduce the risk through compliant procurement practice, gain agreement to the savings methodology so we can record those and reflect that back to members and give you the tools as well to be able to reflect that back to your residents, and move to a stable position where we are all delivering robust procurement using the same documentation on the same systems, so that then we can then move to a point where we look to growth. The timetable for that, Q1, procurement strategy will be delivered. So I know that was a point for this group, but procurement strategy will be delivered for this January to March, as will the procurement rules and savings methodology and that professional development plan that I mentioned. As we go into Q2, we want to have that partnership agreement signed and everybody working in the same way and signed up to the same requirements. We're on a good understanding of spend across participating councils that I mentioned earlier. Q3, finalise that common procurement documentation, embed that in clear collaborative procurement and framework plan so that we know what we're doing over the next few years, and then Q4 with growth. So hopefully that gives an oversight of what we're doing across the Essex Procurement Partnership. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. I think first off, we've got Councillor Julie Young.
Hi, good evening. I guess, I've got quite a lot of questions actually. I suppose for me, there was quite a lot to concern myself with in terms of your presentation. And I picked out, and maybe I'm being unfair, and maybe this really isn't questions for you. And I think actually we should have had an officer from, our council here as well, because this is decisions we're making. You're not here representing Kier Construction or Deloitte or anything. We are a democratic organisation, and there were some things that you said, things like Dan Gascoigne is setting the strategy, and members will be reviewing. Well, for me, we're democratic organisations, all of those councils that you've named, and actually it is for the it's for the elected members to actually set that strategy. And I kind of think of Bob Russell, and probably good job he's not here, because there's often allegations about, whether this is a a council that's run by members or whether it's run by officers. And I think probably these questions are not really fair for you. And I think perhaps we should have had somebody from the senior leadership team here to answer these questions. So my question, I guess it would be for you, Rosa, about the democratic process that's been followed to get us to this stage. And for me, I was in Cabinet last year, but I've been out of Cabinet since May. This is the first time I've seen a presentation on this. So where have the decisions been taken in the democratic process within this authority, and where is the scrutiny of that, please? And then I think there is also some worrying elements of this in the sense that your third priority is social value. So we do all the other things and then we get to, well, then we'll start worrying about social value. And to me, I think we've just had that asset community development presentation. We've just had this ABCD approach, and we know that we're going to have less money going forward, and we've got to make sure the money that we do spend actually counts for much more than perhaps it has done in the future. So actually, our priority is that social value piece, and that should be our top priority. But it worries me that Dan Gascoigne is deciding all the strategy, and where's our voices in all of that? I've not actually seen where we can actually input into that. You also say nothing about the split. When I was at Essex County Council, I know that there was a 70-30 split in terms of money and quality. So you've said nothing about that, whether it's a 50-50 split or whether that decision has been made or whether that's been discussed, and where's our voice in that discussion? It seems to be nowhere. So, you know, I'm sure it will deliver savings, but, you know, I'm a bit worried about this presentation and where we've had any chance at all to input into this and to have those discussions about where our priorities are. You know, for me and my group, they would want to be looking at community wealth building, you know, local procurement, keeping as much of the resources in this city as we possibly can, bringing jobs for our town, worrying about apprenticeships for our citizens. Where is all of this in that, and where is our voice to make sure that happens? I don't see it in your presentation. So I'd probably ask Rosa to kick off with this answer, please.
We'll actually bring in Sam Preston to respond, Julie.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, Julie. I think I completely understand your points, and I think had I been able to speak a little bit better earlier, I would have given a better introduction to this and explained why we've brought this particular presentation. So in terms of the governance, it was in the presentation, but it probably didn't quite come through that we haven't actually formally joined this partnership yet. So we've got a seat at the table, we're involved in all of the discussions, but we haven't signed up to be part of the partnership yet. And that is something that we'll be looking to do around Q2. So obviously we will bring that through all of the relevant governance processes. So we will make sure that everyone has a say and that everyone understands what we're signing up to, and is kind of contributing towards those decisions. And then the other point that I noted down was around social value. So this presentation was very much about the partnership. There's still an awful lot of work to do within that partnership around the strategy and the direction that it's going to take. But in terms of Colchester Council, we do prioritise social value. So nothing's changed from the discussions that we've had previously in terms of how we want to prioritise that. We now have the KPI that looks at how many contracts provide social value. Sorry. Sorry.
Shall I explain? It's easier. Sam, I'm really interested in what you've got to say, but unfortunately there's no subtitles up, so everything that you've said up to now, I have no idea. So I think Owen is frantically trying to get some subbies up, so if we can just hang on, because I really want to hear every pearl of wisdom that drops from your lips.
I may be able to turn these on. Let me see if I can do it. Does anything come up now if I speak?
Nothing so far, Sam.
No, okay. sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it.
Bear with us for a moment, Sam. We'll come to you.
Thank you very much for your patience. Just to say that we're going to pause the meeting so that we can make sure that the meeting is fully accessible so that all members can hear what's going on. So there'll be a short pause. Thank you.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Yeah, there's a time delay, but it's working. Yeah, it's working and no subtitles. Can I just say thank you?
Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. So hopefully now all the systems should be working with subtitling as well. Can I ask Sam Preston to respond, please? And can you begin again from the beginning? Thank you, Sam.
Yes, no problem. Just want to check that that's all working for me speaking as well.
Yeah, I've got the grand jury room scene, but I can read the subtitles.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So yeah, in terms of the partnership arrangements, so I think it came out in the presentation, but possibly not clear enough. So we haven't actually signed up to this partnership just yet. So the idea was that we started the discussions early last year and saw the benefits in working together with the partners. Those discussions have been ongoing. There's lots of work that needs to be done in the background to understand how that could work. But the proposal is that we would look to sign formally up to the partnership in the second quarter of next year. When we get to the point of knowing what that agreement looks like, what the strategy looks like, that's when we will go through the local governance process. So we will make sure that everyone is engaged in that and that people can have their say. In terms of social value, that's still very much a priority in Colchester. And I think in some ways, and James can correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably a little bit ahead with social value. We do use the TOMS already. We have a portal that we use, and we do ensure that we assess it for all contracts over £100,000. It was also included as a KPI for this year, and that will continue. So we won't be kind of losing any of the momentum that we've got locally within that. And then I think the other kind of point was just around who's the decision maker and whether that be Braintree or who that would be. I think what James was trying to get across in the presentation is that it is very much a partnership. So although Dan Gascoigne is kind of chairing that meeting, it doesn't mean that he's the decision maker. So we all have a seat at that table and we're all contributing to what this will look like going forward. So it's definitely not a kind of a done deal. We're still working through it with all of the partners. We're in a slightly different position in Colchester in that we have that specific resource. And I think some of the other authorities weren't in that position. So it's slightly more complex for us to join. So there is a lot of work to be done, but we can bring updates and yet no formal decisions will be made without going through the correct processes.
Chair, can I just follow up something that hasn't come out of the answer? Chair, can I just follow up?
Yes, sorry, I was listening to another comment, yeah.
The other thing is the 70-30 split or whether there's going to be a 50-50 split.
Sorry, what's that in relation to?
Price and quality. So the point is, Sam, that if it's a 70-30 split on price, you can end up, as I'm sure we have done in the past, say like a guttering contract for Colchester Borough Homes to replace the guttering, and I'm pretty sure this did happen, or fascia boards or whatever. You can end up with a contractor coming all the way down from Scotland because of, you know, the emphasis is on price, and so you go with the cheapest price. But if you put social value at the beginning of that conversation and at the heart of that decision making, you might come to a different conclusion in terms of that procurement. Procurement, I think, is one of the most important things to get right. And, you know, I'd like some reassurance about how we're moving forward on that. So I'm a bit concerned that, you know, you're not familiar with the way that actually, you know, certainly in Essex, it used to be a 70-30 split on price being 70% and 30% on quality.
Yes,
James.
sorry.
Apologies, sorry. Sam, do you want to go ahead and then maybe James come in after you?
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, sorry, I am familiar with that. I didn't understand in the context that you were saying. But in terms of Colchester, we tend to set the criteria for the specific procurement activity that we're doing. So we do ask to see social value in there, but the different levels can be weighted depending on what it is that we're procuring. But that's what we want to come through in the strategy about setting a standard of what we expect to see. What we don't want to do is then throw procurement so that we're kind of tied into the social value where that probably isn't the priority for a specific contract, but we do want to make sure that that is definitely a priority. So again, that we don't have a level that's defined at this point, but we will be working with the partnership or not to make that happen for Colchester and to make sure that it does have a real emphasis. There's been a lot of work around understanding the contracts that we have that are local. We actually mapped them across the country to try and understand where we're using local and where we're not. And we are fairly good, I would say, but there's lots more work to be done there. And again, it does depend on what it is that we're procuring.
James, did you want to come in as well now?
Mike.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted us to pick up that point in that all decisions are around procurement policies, around procurement strategy, although we will be looking to help develop them, the decision making is not a decision making group. None of the groups that I talked about are decision making groups in that sense. Each authority would take this information back through their own governance structures and approve them. So we may propose a commonality around procurement rules, but we cannot make that decision. It is not a decision-making group. It has to go back into each member authority, and they will make decisions about what they do and do not want to do. And that includes questions around individual procurements, around percentage splits between quality and price, and anything around spend. The group cannot make any decision around Colchester City Council spend. It is down to your council and the decision-making processes that are in your council to make those decisions. We are there to try and enable you and support you, but we can't make decisions. It's absolutely not part of how we set up.
Thank you. Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you, and thank you for sorting this. This is actually awesome. I've got subtitles on everything, which is lovely. Following up from Julie, and I mean, Julie put it very succinctly, but I wanted to drill down a bit more about the members advisory group when that's set up, and there's a member from each authority, and I'm guessing, can you confirm, will that be in the gift of the leader at the time to appoint who sits on the advisory board? It is called the advisory board, yes, of the advisory group. So that was one point. And you know, economies of scale, on the face of it, that looks great and it makes perfect sense. But if we've put all our eggs in one basket and the markets can be very volatile and we're, you know, businesses that you never thought would go under have gone under, that could be a threat. And I just wondered what other threats that you had identified so far?
Thank you, Councillor. Just to pick up on the economies of scale point, absolutely, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to understand the markets. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We want to understand the risks attached to each of the procurement decisions. So what we are doing, or what we want to do through this, is to have much better market intelligence so that we can make decisions. So in some cases, we will want to drive social value and drive the local economy, and we will want to have much smaller, locally specified contracts. In other cases, then it may make sense to bring that together. But the idea is that we do that in an intelligent way, where we understand the market and understand what's best for the council. But to reassert that point, also, what we will be saying, this is what we're going out to procure, but it will be down to each individual authority to confirm or comment or challenge on the procurement strategy that we put forward. And actually, if they disagree, then we need to listen to that and change that procurement strategy to meet with those needs.
And sorry, just confirmation about the advisory group, the member advisory. Hello, Rosa.
Hello, so I'll come in on that point. So the member advisory board, the representative from Colchester will be the relevant portfolio holder. So in that circumstances, it will be the portfolio holder for resources, Councillor Corey.
Clarification is always good.
Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, James, for your presentation. Rosa, I think you may have overstepped slightly there. We have the matter of an election before this goes live. Portfolio holders may change. You never know what's going to happen. But actually, that's the first point I wanted to make. If we're intending to sign up to a partnership in Q2, there is no council time before then to assess the offering. There are no meetings. So how can we, as members, give approval to this? There are no meetings scheduled because we're at the end of the municipal year. That was the first point I wanted to make. The second point, this partnership slide on page 41 that sets partner working group, strategic officer group, and then member advisory group seems to me to be back to front. I would have expected members to be setting strategic direction and officers to be acting on members' direction, not the other way round. And then I had a question for James, if I may. James, the contracts you mentioned, if I've understood this correctly, the average contract value is around 78,000, based on your 55 million divided by 700. Is that right? And what level of savings are we hoping to achieve? And then my second question for, I don't know, maybe Rosa and maybe James, what's the cost to Colchester of joining this partnership? Thank you.
Can I bring in Councillor King, Council Leader, to answer? Thank you.
Thank you. I insist I'm not going to join you, although it's tempting. Make me an honorary member of the policy panel. Might as well, yeah, quite. Look, thank you, James, also, and Sam from a distance. The heart of this is the direction that's been set, approved by full council, which has gone through various stages of assessments. I think it's gone into governance and scrutiny, certainly one of those, and it's been through most recently through cabinet before December. I do not expect members here to, given the amount of material we all get through, to recall that or necessarily look at it, but it may help to circulate the paper that was sent round in December. I can suggest we do, because that sets the context for us. The latest repeat, really, of an accepted direction. And that accepted direction is we are better off working with partners. It's not new. I've got in front of me just some of the headlines here and remind ourselves of what we do. Well, we know Colchester Ipswich Museum Service, that's joined, North Essex Parking Partnership, Shared Payroll Service. We're trying to agree on what to do next on tendering Colchester Borders. I look at Councillor Julie Young here because it's an enjoyable project. There's much more to go. Essex Procurement Service Partnership is just one more element of that. We're also looking, and members might recall this, we're looking at a shared back office. So ICT, finance, management, HR, revenues and benefits. Why are we doing that? It's because we know if we do it well, it brings us significant benefits in twofold. One, to the bottom line, that really, really matters. Every time we can spend less for the same outturns, then we have more resource to meet either budget gap or to meet other needs and outcomes we all would consider desirable. It's always a trade, this. You lose potentially some authority, we get some significant advantages, and we've got ourselves comfortable, even in my short time as a councillor, we've got ourselves comfortable with the fact that nominally you lose some authority. In practice, you extend it. You work with your partners and you have more influence, more scope, and a really important thing, you get more resilience in the organisation. So many members, you do, Rhys, pay attention to the finances. We're getting, with every respect to our past and current team, we're getting a richer service by working with Epping. So expertise, depth of expertise, and overall resilience, it's no different in my view here. So I just want to kind of just remind members, this is not an aberration. This is absolutely a flow of where we've agreed to go, where we need to go. But it is also, of course, true we need to remind and share with members as we go why they should have the comfort that I would have in principle and in the knowledge that the depth and detail always are the benefit for a conversation. That's one reason why the principle of the approach and the briefing today was brought here. There's a little bit of learning which we'll take about the order in which we set the scene. Hard for you to set out your piece without the introduction, so we'll take that away. That's a bit of learning. It would have helped members. I saw you all get a bit more comfortable when you realise we're not upending decision making. We're just ensuring that what we buy will be more effectively bought and will be better value. And I thought that would be helpful, and I hope that might be some answer, at least in part, to you, Rhys. We'll look at the specifics of next steps. I'll come back to you on that particular question, Chair, if we can sort of make sure we know what you want to ask. And we'll make sure we come back on some specifics around, for example, authority. But this is absolutely in the mainstream what we've agreed as a council. We are up against it, working together across North Essex. There's nine local authorities in the mix here. 2 or 3 are leading. Those 2 or 3 are leading include Colchester.
Can I just ask, James, do you want to come in on the statistical issue, just to maybe clarify that now?
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the average, we're still gathering some of that data, so I can't give you an answer around what the average is. Obviously, there are differences across those contracts where you have some that are extremely large, and then you'll have a sort of significant tail of spend, which is significantly lower spend. I can sort of look at that with Sam to understand that for Colchester, and then look at it for sort of the wider procurement partnership. But that's what we have found is significant spend in a small or sort of a smallish level of contracts, and then a significant tail end after that, which is something that we are looking at. In terms of the savings, we haven't targeted savings at the moment, and part of that reason is we're still very much in the early stages, as Sam was saying. We are gathering the information around contract activity and forward plan. We are peer reviewing some of our spend against other contracts that are available, so that we can start to see what we are spending compared to our peers, and where there may be opportunities to make savings. But when we create a savings target, we want to have confidence in that. So we don't want to share that, or we don't want to nail that down until we've done the proper due diligence around that.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Scott Patel, please?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, there was one other question about what's the cost to Colchester for being part of the partnership?
Councillor King, do you want to respond to that?
Can I help? The December paper, which, as I say, I suggest we circulate, that covers is an update on where we're heading in the wider terms and where we've headed. It doesn't quite answer the question, it's the best I've got. Each constituent council is required to contribute £20,000 in this year and 40,000 in next, but that's for a range of collective pieces of work to, that back office exploration, finance, ICT, PM, HR, revenue and benefits. So it's that order. It's relatively small, but we agreed that we would, across North Essex, create some self-standing resource. Otherwise, we're doing the usual beg and borrow. So I'm expecting a pull and a tug on existing staff and a small group who will work across the 9 local authorities to see where we can deepen that cooperation and along the lines I've described, and where we can find benefit, lock ourselves in together. That's working well in a number of ways. It'd be interesting to see where it goes next, I have to say. I'm expecting an update on this, and I'll make sure, helped by this conversation, that we do that. And I think it's the kind of thing we might, Reece, usefully talk to all members about when we got a little bit further down the track. But it's going to take a little while. Thanks.
Can I bring Sam Preston back in as well, please?
Thank you. Just on that point, again, we're a little bit ahead of those kinds of decisions, but just to mention that in Colchester, we are fortunate that we have that resource. So it's not necessarily going to be a cost to the council, but more about how our resource can contribute to the wider partnership. So we do need to refine all of that, but other authorities potentially have bought in because they didn't have that resource, but we do. So I would hope that that would be very minimal, and it would be more about how we work together more closely.
Thank you. Apologies. So, Leslie, Councillor Scott Patel, I think you wanted to make a point now.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. I'm just wondering, I don't know, I'm frantically reading the subtitles, David, and sometimes there's some howlers of typos, but I think you said that a lot of this had been agreed and it's gone through scrutiny. But I'm now wondering, when this is, with the questions that have come up tonight, and the fact that this is a change in policy, a change in direction, why didn't we see it first? Why didn't it come to us first? And then we could have had all these conversations in the early days, whereas now we're so far down the track now. The comments that we are now making are almost as an afterthought. So I'm just confused.com as to why it didn't come to us first when we were looking at the work programme.
Councillor King.
Well, if members feel they're not well cited, my apologies for that. But I ask for a little understanding. You've had a fairly full agenda, as another evening that's heading towards 8 is going to illustrate. And Councillor Leslie Scott Patel, because you and I have had these conversations, that I care very much about giving opportunities where we can for member engagement at every level. But we do work as part of a committee system, and we do accept, with all its, if Sir Bob was here, he would tell us the faults of a cabinet system, but we do accept, and that's open as well, that in a number of different ways, we publish the intent, we set the challenge. Last cabinet meeting, well, that was an interesting one, but that went on to 9, right? An hour of have your say. So I do want to sort of just gently push back. We are rightly as open as we can be, and we share as we go. It is not new to be going down the line of shared services. It has been published and reaffirmed as an intent, and I thought I heard clearly that we're not at the end yet of the process, which will allow for a conversation around how this particular shared service might work well in Colchester. So I would say we're not there yet. We're not at the close. We're having sight before we close on where we're heading, and I'm very happy to ensure that we find a way of ensuring members here are content with what we're doing. I'm happy to take that away as a more than an administrative thing, as the right thing to go and do. But it is in the path that we've set, and which is, as I say, being signed off for good reason.
If I can just come back. Yeah, I mean, I understand things are changing and it's very fluid as to what's happening. And as I said earlier, economies of scale make perfect sense. But I still think it should have come to us first, and it's down to us as the panel to decide what our workload is and what we're prepared to do. And I'm sure if something had been said to the panel, I'm sure Councillor Yag would have said, let me cast my eye over that. You know, but we haven't had that opportunity, so I'm a little bit sad about that, David. Okay. As I said, I understand it's a fluid situation. There's a lot of pressure on everybody, but I think at the end of the day, it's our say as to whether we want to look at it or we decide it's too much work, which we don't actually.
Yeah.
Rosa, I believe you want to come in.
So can I just ask a clarification question? Your reference to having an early slide, is that specifically on this procurement strategy piece, or is that something more broader? Just for clarity, I fear we might be crossing paths with things.
So if you read the work plan, this is grandly titled the Council's Policy on Procurement. Those decisions, whether we should pursue a shared service agenda or not, have already been taken without the policy panel giving an opinion or a recommendation to Cabinet whether shared service centres might be the right thing for this council. I'm pretty certain they are, but the governance and the terms of reference require this committee to give a recommendation to Cabinet. We have not given a recommendation to Cabinet.
I thank you. When I hear that, I would feel the same. Like, just to be clear, I'm not in a different position. I'm a member, fellow member. I use those words deliberately, and I try to operate that way. So I think there is something for us to take. I think we have to think about what we can do with the time we have left. Are you meeting? When do you meet next, Chair?
6th of March. That's our final meeting.
Well, can I suggest we take online whether or not we can either have a short session, informal or formal, or catch your meeting on the 6th of March. I would want you, as we mostly succeeded the last 2 years, to catch the spirit of what we set out to do in terms of that title. So I'm very happy to help if I can and get us back to that.
No, I know anecdotally, I believe we've got quite a full agenda of next meeting, but if it were necessary, perhaps we could have a standalone or separate meeting, because I think it's really important to cover this issue and the other items. You know, we've got some very important updates, for example, on leisure and sport as well, to come back at next meeting. So thank you. Thanks for your understanding.
Chair, if I might, I absolutely understand, and I'll say that again to fellow members. Perhaps we can take this, perhaps we could provide some detail on opportunity out of committee if the timeline is what it is. But could I take that away with my senior officers and see where we're at? But I do hear that we're not kind of standing in the way, but we always want to have a bit richer understanding, and would have liked to have had that earlier if you could.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to members for all your input on this item. Councillor Young, sorry, you just snuck in.
Yeah, I guess, I don't want to prolong this. We've kind of been around the houses on this, but I think this, as I said before, is really important for the council. We've got less money at our disposal, and we need to make sure we're using it as wisely as we possibly can. Ultimately, we hold the responsibility for the resources and how we use them. So, you know, it's not about us having a greater understanding with respect, Leader. It's about us inputting into that decision. Whether the Cabinet take the recommendations of the policy panel on board or not, it's for you to decide. But, you know, it is not just about us having a greater understanding, it's about inputting into that decision-making process. And as others said, we haven't had that. I think, you know, there's a piece of learning, I think, and I guess that goes to Rosa, about how this item has been presented. You know, with respect to James, thank you very much for coming, but the presentation you've given us is sort of like a fait accompli almost about what is happening in terms of the partnership. But, you know, it would have been helpful to have a much richer explanation by our officers about, and I get your point about, oh, well, you know this is coming, don't you? We're working with other councils and we need to work with other councils to make best value, you know, best use of resources. Yes, of course, we're all aware of that, but this is getting into the detail now. But we've had no opportunity to discuss the detail. So, you know, I'll leave it there, Chair, but, you know, I think it's a lesson for the future about how we present items like this, of this importance and magnitude.
Thank you. Councillor Smithson, did you want to come back in briefly on another point?
I do, thank you, Chair. I actually have a technical question, if I may. A procedural and process technical question. So James, am I right in thinking that under this, we wouldn't be entering into framework contracts with suppliers? Each council will still be contracting as individual councils. So from a legal perspective, how do you achieve the economies of scale if you're still negotiating 6 different contracts?
Thank you, Councillor. So we can go out for a common procurement, which agrees that the member authorities are looking to procure X level of goods or services over that time. As you rightly say, there isn't a legal entity, so it would be for Colchester City Council to enter into a contract on that framework, as it would for Braintree or any other authority. But what we're looking to do is to go out for a common procurement, much the same way as potentially Crown Commercial Services would go out, bringing together the joint demand of multiple organisations, multiple councils and organisations across the country for a larger requirement to try and deliver increased savings, but they wouldn't contract on behalf of those respective authorities.
Okay, so if I may follow up, did the partners consider a formal consortia model at all?
We are still in discussions around models and such. You know, as we said, we haven't signed a partnership agreement yet, and we are doing work around that. But we have considered a consortium model, and we are not at this time looking at that having one legal entity. That is not to say that that's not an option for future, but at this time it wasn't felt that that was the appropriate way forward. But as I say, the conversation is continuing. As said in slides, we haven't signed that partnership agreement yet, so that is something, all of those elements will be considered ahead of signing.
Okay, thank you. That's really good to understand. I think if there's any consideration of a change of legal structure, then it absolutely needs to come back here and probably to governance and audit. Consortias are notoriously difficult to run and manage. But thank you, it's really helpful. Thank you, James.
Rosa, do you want to come in?
I've just been reflecting back on all of the conversations and the feedback that we've received, and I've just been looking back also at the covering report that was presented that sets out that, similar to as Councillor King described, this setting out a bit of a journey, and the executive summary sets out that the council's working towards being part of an Essex procurement partnership, which is aiming to bring the services together to enable a more effective procurement activity, value for money and efficiency, and to improve category management. and that a joint procurement strategy is being developed, which will be adopted by all partners. Mark, what I'm hearing is that you've kind of had a bit of a feel today from the presentation, although the context of that feels a bit of a fait accompli, is what I'm hearing. And very happy to have that more informal meeting to talk about this in more detail. But we're still in a very early process and we're not at any stage of any sign-off, etc. And I will speak to Sam offline about this, but coming back to this panel for the next phase as to the work that James has already indicated, the assessments, etc., some of the more detailed questions, that we come back again with the next iteration. It does need to go through a governance process. I'm presuming that will be through scrutiny before it gets to cabinet, etc. But the policy panel, as you quite rightly state, is that forum where this comes into this group for more discussion. So if I can, if you're okay with that, I'll talk to Sam a bit more offline around that, about how we can do another formal session to give you more opportunity to feed into that, and then come back at an appropriate time before we continue progressing this any further.
Sorry, Councillor Lissamore, have you got last point on this?
Yeah, sorry, I'm more confused now because I thought I understood this and now I don't think I do. So we would all join together to procure, goods, a good deal with contractors. I get that absolutely, completely. So at what stage do we all sign up? Could we actually, you're saying that, you could actually get to, how do we all join together in this? But as I say, I'm really confused now. If you come forward with a scheme and said, right, we've worked out, let's say, legal department, and Colchester look at it and go, no, this is not what we want. And Tendring look at it and go, no, this is not what we want. And Braintree look at it and say, no, actually, this is not what we want. So you end up with just Essex County Council going for it, for example. How are you going to make these savings? How are you going to sell it when each of us could drop out if it doesn't actually suit our needs? So, sorry, I'm just confused by it all.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think there's a number of benefits that we tried to set out in slide 1. So one is around resilience. So us working together so that we don't have one employee working in procurement or one or two within the service. So it's a much more resilient service. So there are benefits beyond just collaborating and creating collaborative procurements. Ultimately, as I said, the decision making for whether to enter into contracts is for each individual local authority. So we would present a procurement strategy that would say, we've looked at your spend, we have identified opportunities potentially to make some savings, and we would then present that to respective authorities. If you then decide to say that you don't want to participate in that collaborative procurement, that is a decision that you can make. We would be suggesting what the benefits would be for collaborating, but nobody is forcing anyone down the line of saying, you've joined a partnership, therefore you must collaborate on these contracts. We will try and present the benefits of those, and we will provide a procurement service irrespective of whether you are collaborating across those contracts or not. Obviously, the idea is the more we collaborate, the more benefits we should be able to achieve.
Sorry, did you want to come back in?
Just very quickly. So we could actually spend £40,000 a year and not actually benefit.
I'm not familiar with the £40,000 a year figure, but the idea is that, as I say, we all work together in a common partnership to deliver benefits. I'm not familiar with the figure.
Councillor Lissamore, perhaps I think it's clear from the discussions this evening that we're going to have a follow-up meeting. So I think probably we need to, bring these very specific questions where we want more detailed responses to that meeting. I think, just so that you can get the answers that you're looking for. Would that be okay to agree to have that? Yeah. Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you, thank you. Just a point of clarification, really, looking at the EPP journey, point 16 for July 23, just before October 23, it says Colchester joins. Does that mean that we join the theory of the idea and support the idea of the partnership procurement, and then the follow-up stuff, which we're going to hear about later, will come after that? What is it actually, what would be committed to by Colchester Joins, please?
Thank you, Councillor, and I absolutely need to clarify that on the workflow there. Essentially, what it means is Colchester joins a conversation, and we start to have conversations around this. And obviously, I didn't bring that out clear enough, but the partnership agreement, none of the partners have signed the partnership agreement yet. We are looking to do that in Q2, and there are lots of further points around procurement strategy and procurement policies that we need to firm up before we do that. But that point essentially means that Colchester joins the conversation.
Thank you, that's what I thought it meant. I just needed to have it crystal clear.
Councillor King.
I only want the final word, if it is a final word, just to be helpful, which is, I think having heard this, so first of all, on the small detail, that reference to 40k is a contribution to a whole variety of shared service discussions across North Essex. It's not specific to this, so if that's a bit of help. But I just want to sort of say, listening to the conversation and looking again at the paper in front of us as a policy panel, see, I'm including myself now as your honorary member. I think it's just the way we haven't framed this conversation well. And the reality is we are still at early stage. What Cabinet has done, consistent with other discussions, is say the heading and direction is towards shared services and why. Cooperation across North Essex, we don't need to belabour that. I think we're all in the same sort of place. But where it's not been in place, and think back to when it has been put in place, there's been lots of intense discussions and lots of, and the right words, Julie, input from members. It's plain to me that we're going to do the same here. That actually we haven't excluded, we could have framed it differently, we haven't excluded the policy panel, we haven't actually got to the point where there's enough to look at. You've got to thank you, James. You've made the right case for saying why it could bring significant benefits, but we're not at that point where in front of any of us is there's something to sign off. So I think I would just sort of say, I'm sorry we didn't get that right collectively. We've got an opportunity to do it. I hope that gives members some comfort that you will have in front of you things over which you can input and you can help make a decision and recommendation. You know it will be welcomed. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for all your contributions. Thank you to James for your presentation and for your participation in the discussion and responses, and to Sam as well, responding remotely. So thank you very much. I think it's very clear from members' points of view this evening that recommendation is that we hold a separate standalone meeting to discuss this in more detail, and that meeting can drill down into issues around the participation of Colchester specifically and how it benefits Colchester in terms of economy and also value to residents, social value, and also more about the sort of frameworks and the responsibilities and how any risks are managed and mitigated, and also around governance and future frameworks as well. I don't know if members agree to that. We're going to have a standalone meeting where we can discuss more. Is that agreeable? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Owen.
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, that a standalone formal meeting rather than informal, or I just need a steer on the
It
format
has to be a
of it?
formal meeting, Chair.
Yeah. Can we take offline to agree a date so that all committee members can attend a formal meeting? We'll agree dates and scheduling. So. Councillor Scott Patel.
Yeah, just clarification again. I'm in clarification mode tonight. The action required is to review and comment on progress on the Essex procurement partnership. I guess that action will be deferred until we have the formal meeting.
Yes, yeah. Come. Owen?
If panel, Chair, if panel wishes to defer any decision on making a recommendation of that sort, yes, absolutely. We can wait until the standalone meeting.
Yeah, okay. So we'll take offline agreeing a date for a formal follow-up meeting. That's okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we're now finished with that item. Moving on to the work plan, which is interesting. Thank you, Owen.
Apologies, I don't have it to hand, but I don't have anything yet to add to it, thankfully. Yes. As Councillor Scott-Buttell has my laptop, she might like to read it for me. But
Laptop. Actually, there is something that I want to bring to the panel's attention, and I know that we're fully booked for March, but we did have a responsible dog owner strategy, which has slipped by the by. And with everything that's going on, things have changed a lot in World of Dogs in the last year. We have the XL Bullies situation going on. We have rescues that are overflowing with dogs. We have dogs that haven't been socialised because of lockdown, which is having knock-on effects. We've had an increase in dog fouling. And I think, I'm wondering, Councillor Laws, if we can make a recommendation to Cabinet to get out, dust down the responsible dog owner strategy so that we can have a look at it in the next financial year. So it's up there ahead of the game before the June meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scott-Buttell. Yes, I mean, we've outlined about this, and, you know, I'm agreeable and supportive of bringing this forward and speaking about this with Cabinet and following up on this issue going forward. Thank you. So I think if we've got no other items to discuss around the work plan, which is probably a good idea at this stage, I would like to thank all members. Sorry, Owen.
I'm going to be terribly.
So I'm trying to get things moving.
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to be terribly pedantic at this point. We just need to approve the work programme with the caveat that we will add in the extra date for the standalone meeting to look at the procurement. But yeah, that's all I had to say, sorry.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, we're agreed on that. Thank you. Sorry for rushing along there. Thank you very much to members for your attendance and for all your input this evening and from those who've presented. Our next official meeting is March 6th, but we'll schedule that other meeting as well. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thanks, Chair.